Welcome into the roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. To my left, Donnie Gilbert, and joining us remotely, Thomas Wasson, our enterprise truck expert. And today, of course, we're talking about Truck Driver Appreciation Week. So we thought we'd delve into this topic and talk a little bit about the state of the American truck driver. And Donnie, I'll start with you because we've had this conversation multiple times, but we're kind of coming out of a quote-unquote pandemic, and things are kind of returning to quote-unquote normal, but we're also coming back into a recession with all those freight volumes now coming back to, again, quote-unquote normal. What are you seeing right now for the American truck driver in terms of getting into the market if they want to, say, for instance, buy a used truck?
You don't use the word recession yet.
Okay.
We went into a boom.
Yeah, we went to a boom and we're recovering.
Every time you go into a boom, it goes up, must come down.
Sure.
So you can use the definition of recession and call it a recession, but I call it normalization.
Okay.
We're getting back into that era. So right now, of course, spot rates for truck drivers are dropping down very low, and that's because during this boom, we got a lot of extra capacity that came in the market. Everybody was learning that drivers were making huge amounts of money, rate per miles on their trucks, so the more started coming into the business. When the more these drivers started going into the industry, they were buying up all the used trucks to try to start. That pushed used truck prices to record highs. And now we're coming down off that. So what's going to happen now is there's too much capacity in the system right now for what the shippers need. So it's going to let spot rates just drop to extremely low levels. And that's where we are right now. With that being said, some of these guys got priced into these trucks at pretty high rates. It's going to be difficult for them to operate. You're looking at fuel prices at record highs or near record highs. So their operating costs are extremely high. Their entry cost to this industry was extremely high, and now they're looking at some of the lowest rates they've seen since almost 2019.
Yeah, definitely a tough way to recover from that there as well. Thomas, let me flip it over to you. Fleets getting hires. We've had a lot more hiring in the past year or so. We heard about this 80,000 truck driver shortage to this point. Seems to be recovering to some degree. As a fleet driver, how do you look at the state of the American truck driver?
Coming from a large enterprise carrier, you're going to expect some forms of disruption in terms of your miles. Now, if your fleet, it depends on how well your fleet has done. We've seen it in the quarterly earnings. Some fleets have performed really well. Some fleets have struggled. But if you're running into a softness in the spot market, you're going to see a retraction of the contracts. You're going to tell yourself, oh, I should be fine. Most large fleets are 90% contract. Well, now we're going to see localized pockets of disruption where maybe you're going to be delayed. Maybe you're having a deadhead for a load. Maybe you're empty miles. So, it's going to be better than the Wild West of the spot market, for sure, being at a large fleet. But at the same time, the challenge now becomes one of utilization and feeding the bucket, because as we see these inventory levels across customer segments, those will impact fleets in different ways based on their portfolio. So if a large retailer has too much inventory, now a portion of my overall truckload network is, fewer load tenders. I have to go out and solicit from other sources.
All right, yeah. Donnie, let me turn back to you. You mentioned, of course, normalization, and that's kind of where we're getting back to. What kind of market are we coming back to in normalization? You touched on a little bit, of course, spot rates are on the floor right now.
Yeah.
But what kind of market are we kind of getting back to, and can we reasonably expect things to return to where we were pre-pandemic?
All right, so trucking is a boom-bust cycle. We just went through one of the longest boom cycles that we ever have. So as we, quote, normalize, we're going to drop down into the bust cycle. And that's because of, like what I was mentioning, too much capacity.
Right.
Now, it's going to work its way out. This is, trucking has been deregulated. It's a free market, probably one of the best examples of a free market. And as shippers realize the overcapacity that's in the markets right now and push those rates down, we're going to lose a lot of drivers. We're going to lose drivers on both the enterprise size and owner-operators. Enterprise size, what Thomas was talking about, they're going to have some issues as well, and it's going to be getting those drivers some miles. Yes, they have a lot of contracted freight, but that freight might be short-haul freight, so you might pick up, run 200 miles, and deliver, and that'd be your whole day, and you get 200 miles. You do that 5 days a week, you get 1,000 miles, and you want 3,000 to 3,500.
Yeah.
So those people are going to hop up and quit and go to the next mega carrier, and then the next mega carrier, and you'll see drivers start jumping around. In times like this, you'll see it'll be available for drivers to jump around. When things well, when things get really tight, drivers can jump for the bonuses. When things loosen up, if it gets too much, if it gets too bad, these carriers may not be hiring drivers because they may not need them. So it can actually make a driver not jump around.
Yeah, Thomas, same question to you there, is looking at, coming out of a pandemic, or seemingly, hopefully coming out of a pandemic and into this quote unquote new normal. How do you see things on the fleet side?
Well, fleet side, Donnie hits an amazing point. Overcapacity, truckload. It's a situation where it's very competitive, and the only barrier to entries are either regulatory because you have to be a certified driver. There's just steps that slow you down before you enter the marketplace. And so, moving forward, we're going to start seeing folks talk about seasonality again. This new normal, the CEOs who had gangbuster quarters are now going to say, oh, well, the reason we're struggling now is because we're returning to seasonality. That's going to be the fancy word to watch, which means that they don't want to say it that we're coming into a down cycle, but completely like what Donnie said, we're going into the downward cycle of the trucking, business. And so it will be rough for some drivers that came in and they're priced in with their equipment. As a large enterprise fleet, this becomes the part of check your customer mix, check your portfolios. How much percentage of my freight is with certain people? And do I need to go to them first and try to remain the incumbent and provide those rate decreases? Or if their services are having issues like the high inventories you're holding on my trailers, you're giving my drivers lower miles, is this the time where I need to start soliciting other it's a never ending thing where your pricing team and your sales are having to pick and choose, because it's choppy waters right now across the board. It's going to be it's not impossible. Obviously these fleets have been doing it for decades, but it will require a little extra effort because like Donnie said, lower mile situations, drivers are paid by the mile. Fleets like that model because if you don't drive, I don't pay you. But drivers do not like that model. And coming into Driver Appreciation Week, they're going to make their voices heard.
I bet that they will. Donnie, moving back to you for just a little bit. We talked a little bit about obviously used truck prices so far, but maybe in terms of just what is the same between pre-pandemic and now, obviously fuel prices and other variables are moving around a little bit. Right now, what would you look at, and what are the biggest headaches right now for drivers at this point?
Well, we're talking about used truck prices. They're falling as we expected. They're not falling as aggressive as I thought they would originally when we talked about this last time. I thought we'd see them fall a little bit more. But we are getting towards that point where we're kind of getting into fourth quarter, and shippers might not push rates down quite so much right now. They may kind of wait and wait till after the first of the year. They don't want to make too many people mad right now. But as a owner-operator, everybody's struggles are going to be a little bit different depending on the mix of freight that you run. If you're an owner-operator that was charging spot rates over the last year and a half, that was really jacking your rates up, you're not going to have many connections. They're not going to be coming back to you and saying, oh, you really took care of me by charging me $8 a mile.
Right.
Those are the guys that are going to really be in trouble. Now, these guys that ran a lot of contracted freight and took care of their customers through this pandemic, maybe a little bit high, but not outrageous. Due to other issues with higher expenses to operate the truck, they understand that. And those are going to be the ones that can fall back to these shippers and say, hey, man, I took care of you this last year. I need you to take care of me now. And those guys will be the ones that are going to be successful and make it through these bus cycles.
Right.
You've got to give and bend both ways. You can't, you can't just overcharge, and now you come back and you're going to be getting the cheapest of the freight, which could put you under.
Right. Thomas, let me switch to our last question here. You got about a minute or so to answer this. What are you bullish about? As Donnie said, we're kind of going into this bust market, but what are you bullish about in terms of the entire trucking industry, particularly, again, the independent or the American truck driver?
I would say I'd remain bullish in that there's opportunity still. We talk about driver shortages and stuff. There's always going to be a need for drivers, but all the technology that we have coming in the pipeline, all the innovations, we talk about freight tech. It's not really a buzzword now because money's chasing it, VCs. So it's becoming easier now to become an owner operator. It's becoming easier now to become a company driver. But at the same time, I'm bullish about the opportunities of an improving life on the road. And so speaking of the Driver Appreciation Week, as long as we're able to not only be cognizant of what they're dealing with, but continue to try and find innovations for them, in spite of the fact that we may see a lot of capacity enter the market, the ones that are left, there's going to be more opportunities to just run their business and as well be successful than in years prior.
Yeah, Donnie, same question. What are you most bullish about going into a bus market? Tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question. It's a tough market, and so I would definitely just make sure that times are changing right now. We're seeing spot rates drop. We're seeing contracted rates drop. You need to take care of your drivers. You need to stay in constant contact with your shippers. Your contracted rates might be too high now, but you can always adjust those. So you got to be smart and stay ahead of the changes. See the changes as they're coming, and stay a little bit ahead of them. And if you're able to do that and keep your drivers rolling, then you'll make it through this next cycle. And then as soon as a lot of this capacity is cleared out of the way, rates are going to start coming back up.
Gotcha. Real quick, Thomas, one thing that you would like to see drivers get out of this in terms of an appreciation week, how should they be appreciated?
This is going to be a super random one, but I kept getting yelled at as a fleet manager because there's no bathrooms at certain shippers. And with the pandemic, they really didn't offer any bathrooms. So for the love of all they can do, give them porta potties that are better. Let them in your facility to use the restroom. Come on, people. That is what my driver appreciation wish.
What is your driver appreciation wish?
More miles.
More miles. That's definitely a good one. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there. But again, hopefully we have a good truck driver appreciation weekend. Thanks for talking about the state of the American truck driver. We'll take a break and come back after this with more.